This conference will now be recorded.
See? Oh, see, look, I waited
Yes, I
until
am.
I waited to make jokes until. All right, Kendall. Well, first off, welcome everybody to the Region 12 Flood Planning Group meeting. Kendall, item number 1, if you could do roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Brian Yanta. Brian, I saw you join online. I'm going to count you.
Yeah, present. Sorry about that.
Thank you, sir. Dave Wegman. Thank you. Derek Bays.
Here.
Thank you. Summer Johnson for Doris Cooksey. Thank you, ma'am. Debbie Reed. Thank you. Neppy Garza.
Present.
Thank you. Kara Tackett.
Present.
Thank you. Jeff Carroll.
Afternoon, all.
Thank you, Jeff. Sabrina Santiago. Thank you. John Beasley. Suzanne Scott. Here. Thank you, ma'am. Jose Reyes.
Present.
Thank you. Dave Mock.
Here.
Thank you. Donovan Burton. Thank you, sir. And Carly Rotzler. It looks like we have both Fernando Perez and Reagan Middleton with us from TDEM. Thank you. Jamie McCool. Jared Bowen.
Here.
Thank you. Chris Robles. Anita Machiavello. Chair, we do have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Kendall. Item number 2, any public comments?
No one has signed up to speak.
All right, thank you. Item 3, approval of the minutes from our previous flood planning group meeting, which was on October 22nd of this year. Are there any comments on the minutes? Debbie? Oh, I just saw. You're just jumping the gun. You're just okay.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Go for it. Yes, please. Please make a motion, Debbie.
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Debbie, a second from Donovan. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, minutes are approved. Item number 4, communications from the Water Development Board.
Nick, it looks like you're online. Are you prepared to make comments for Anita?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you, Nick.
Come on down, Nick.
Thank you all. I just want to give you all an update. We hosted the second cycle contract kickoff webinar this past 2 weeks ago, I believe, in November. We were going over contract details, new scope of work tasks, payment requests, and minimum guidance. And that information, those slides, and the recording can be found on our website. I can post a link in the chat later if you'd like. Please check out the recording webinar, like I said. Reminder about upcoming webinars. Their payment request webinar is going to be Thursday, January 9th, 2025. And then we are also going to be having a chair's conference call. That is to be determined. And then that is about it. That's all I have for today.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for Water Development Board? Okay. Next item is the chair report. First, I'd like to welcome Sabrina Santiago from the city of San Antonio, our newest representative, and she's here for our first meeting. So Sabrina, welcome aboard. Anything, can you give your thumbnail, 30-second sketch about yourself, please?
Well, thank you all for having me. I'm excited to be here. I have been with the city of San Antonio for 17 years. I have been the capital programs manager, floodplain administrator for the city of San Antonio for the last 4 years, and wholly within public works. I'm not one of those that have hopped around quite a bit. So I am excited to be here, and thank you all for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. And we look forward to having you here and participate and represent the city. Next item for the chair report. So we have the River Authority has executed the HDR contract. So our technical consulting team is fully on board, which is great news, which puts them in position for the next item after this. And then finally, the notifications have gone out for the amendment proposals to the plan for new projects, changes to projects. We've sent that out to all of the sponsors and entities from the last cycle, using our contact list, using our technical consulting team list, including ones that didn't submit anything. So again, if you know of entities that you think need to be contacted, need to be reminded, whatever, please let Kendall know, and we'll work to get them more information. But we will continue that drumbeat throughout this process until the window closes. But the sooner the better. We do have to stress that if they want to get something in, it needs to be sooner rather than later, so that the technical team can review it and go through that process. Did I cover everything appropriately, Kendall?
January 15th is the deadline, which is a great segue because we'll discuss that in our next item.
Is that only for entities who did not submit, or can entities submit a revised list, or is that their next item? So hush up. Okay.
All right. So with that concludes my chair report. We'll move on to item number 6, which is by our technical consulting team, a presentation on the Water Development Board amendment guidance and the Region 12 strategy. All right, Ron, are you up?
Yes, I'll take the start on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what we wanted to do today is present to you a little bit about what the state plan is for the amendment process, and talk about what we have in place here locally, and then how that'll fit in on the overall schedule. So first things first, the regional flood plans can be amended. The FMXs can have additional informations or new information. So the entity can submit, if they hadn't submitted before. This is for anybody. Anybody can resubmit on a new FMX, or they can revise an FMX that already exists. So
S to an E to a P if they've done additional work in the interim, or say like they were a city of 200. Or a city could amend theirs if maybe the list wasn't very comprehensive the first time.
absolutely. So if somebody wants to come in and add something, they can absolutely add something. They can add a new project, modify a new one. However, there are some requirements that have to be met. The FMXs must meet the Water Development Board guidelines that we had to submit in the original plan, and that means all GIS data, H&H models, cost estimates, BCAF, and downstream analysis, all of that. And it is the responsibility of the entity submitting to do that. We're on a tight timeline. It's not. It would not be in our time frame for us to do it. Y'all to approve it. So it has to come to us fully vetted and meeting all of those criteria.
Does the entity have to fill out basically the spreadsheet form information that was done for each project previously? So it's not like they're going to send you everything, you're going to fill it out. There may be a little back and forth, but it's really going to be more like, oh, Derek, y'all have a new project. Great. Here's our form. Let's talk through, but you fill this out and submit it.
Yeah, we will be submitting the amendment and all of the tables and figures and everything that go with that, but they will have to provide that to us in their submittal. So
you determine whether or not it's complete regarding the guidelines. I mean, you will make that determination.
Yes.
And if for some reason that submittal is not complete, you go back to the sponsor and say, we need more information here or there for it to be complete, to meet the guidelines.
Correct. And, part of it is and Suzanne, part of it is going to be, if we got one submittal, we can probably do a lot more on our end. But if we get 45 submittals,
Sure.
they're going to have to be complete, because in order for us to get that done. So the amount of effort that we're able to put into that is going to be solely based on the number of amendments that we get in the door, and we can help out. The fewer the amendments, the more we can help out on. But
Is there a part of the budget for their contract that
and all
goes?
of that is due the 15th.
Apologize. That's okay. I was just curious if your contract that you now have provides some monies for HDR to assist
there's monies
There is a
included
budget.
for 2 amendments.
for two.
Amendments.
Well, geez.
Yes.
I got a question. What's the time frame and timeline on this to get this done?
We're going to get into that in the next slide, but it's pretty quick.
And Ron, just to confirm, all of those GIS, all H&H models, all of that is required by January 15th.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ron, do we yet have any sense of you expect there to be any amendments, or
I do
you're
expect,
you're
I do expect
you know of
some.
a
We've had a
few?
couple of consultants reach out. A couple of the agencies have said that they plan to. I don't expect a lot from what I've been hearing. I mean, there's not just our door's not getting beat down with questions, but I do expect a handful.
Some more than none. Okay.
Yes.
Chair, I do have a question, and maybe it's a request because Texas Water Development Board is requesting quite a bit of information. And recognizing that most of the communities within our river basin, with the exception of, county, the city, San Antonio, they don't have such a sophisticated staff that can provide some of this information. Is there any way that we could provide maybe a go-by or an example? Because I'm thinking, they may be able to have a HEC-RAS model, maybe an H&H, maybe some rational equation model or something, but to expect, again, my favorite city, Runge, to come up with BCAs, to come up with all of these very sophisticated, things that may be difficult, maybe have an example of what it's going to take so that those elected officials or those that be making the decisions can be able to properly hire somebody or get somebody to provide that kind of work. Just because I'm thinking right now, if we look at all our projects, well, I tell you, they score very low when it comes into the BCA. And part of it is, we don't have the horsepower to say with some of these communities. And I know the River Authority does a great job of doing that, but my goodness, I mean, can we provide some kind of example for these communities that are thinking of submitting?
No. I mean, hey, we're at what, December 3rd and January 15th with a couple of holidays in there. I mean, I don't know how there's time to do that.
There's most of, when you talk about the BCA, I mean, the guidelines are right there. It's spelled out. I mean, there's a lot of that that's easy. And again, and so January 15th, let me go through a couple of slides. Let's get through a little bit, and then I'll come back to your question, Effie, and it'll kind of help. We need to talk about the schedule and how that's going to go through, because January 15th is the schedule for them to submit to start this process. Okay, and let's see if the two things that are required by the Water Development Board for us to do that is there have to be 2 meetings. The first meeting is to consider whether to proceed with the amendment, which most likely we will, and that's kind of when we can talk about, hey, we've received this many amendments, how much help we think we can help them, or we think these are complete, we can help them with. So that's where we can have a larger discussion on that. And then the second meeting is to consider and take action to adopt.
Do both of those meetings have to be the full RFPG, or can one be the technical on the, whether to consider to proceed in the second meeting, action and adoption? Can those be
full planning group
both
meeting.
full planning group
Yes.
meetings?
Mhm.
Oh,
So with that, we'll kind of get into walking through our local process that we have set up so far.
So the flyer that Kendall nicely made and printed out was up there in the front if you didn't get a chance to get one. This went out to the entities that have worked with the Region 12 group. And basically what it does is help spell out for them what this amendment process is. And really the whole goal for this amendment is 2026 funding. So this is not the only opportunity for an individual, a sponsor, to get a project in the plan. This is just if they know in 2026 they want to seek funding, this is their time to amend something that's already in the plan or put something new into the plan. So I guess kind of along the lines of providing assistance to communities that want to get things in, maybe they're not quite ready yet. It's not the end all be all. It's just this is the one chance you're going to get to make those changes to go after money in 2026. And to fit within the timeline of what we're doing with the overall state plan and what Texas Water Development Board is able to accommodate, they need all of those additional information to them by April 1st. And so we kind of created a timeline that stepped back from them that allowed HDR have to update the plan, update all the information, the tables, the reporting that needs to go into it. And that led us to that January 15th timeline. To help us understand how many people are interested, which kind of also helps answer the question of, will we be able to provide a little more assistance? We kind of need to know what the amount of submittals we would be expecting. And so we are asking that by December 15th, an individual sponsor reach out and just give us a notice of an intent. So will you be submitting something, whatever it might be, FMS, FME, FMP, give us a heads up. That way we can have better communication with that sponsor, find out what they have, make sure that they're going to be able to reach that goal by January 15th. And then, if you want the next one. We also included a list of what they would need to include with that submittal, so that way they're thinking about, do I have this information already? An FME is an easier lift. It's really just, what do you want to study and how much does it cost? Whereas an FMP, it includes those things like a model, BCA, no impact. And so hopefully this list helps facilitate that conversation when we hear those notice of intents from individuals, so we can have those conversations on, where do you stand with the package that you have pulled together? How do we need to get you across the finish line?
Yeah, and I think Kendall, take us back one slide, please. If you look at the schedule, January 15th, we're going to ask for entities to turn in information. Then in February, at that planning group meeting, we will bring to you to say, there was one amendment, there was 5 amendments, there's 15 proposed. This is, these are many are FMEs, these many are FMPs. These are complete. These will need more information. We think we can, BCA wasn't submitted, but we can handle that. So in February, we'll have a lot better feel to be able to tell you where we stand with each one of the FMXs, and that's where you would we will kind of just determine the feasibility, and that's where you'll determine whether or not we're going to proceed with making that amendment. Then in March, by the end of March, mid-March, we would come to you with the final package. So that gives the entities essentially, while they're turning in the package January 15th, that gives them additional 2 months to kind of wrap that up. So there's a little bit of time to go back and forth in there and kind of figure that out. And we're also giving them a list, telling them what they need. And INEFI, if somebody, if we get in there in January, there's a list of 2 people or one entity that needs help, we're most likely going to be able to help them. We don't think that there's going to be a significant amount, so we think that there's going to be some room for, Rungi can't come to us and say, we're thinking about doing a project, right? I mean, and then it's like, well, we're not going to start this and run this for you. But if they say, hey, we just can't figure this BCA thing out, can you help us? Yes, we'll help them along that path.
And just a reminder, this amendment process is critical to those who think that they'll be interested in applying for 2026 FIF funding. If that doesn't apply to an entity, they are welcome to fall under Task 4 or Task 5 of this new 5-year cycle. They can be a part of the 2028 Regional Flood Plan. It's just the amendment process in this timeline is matching up with the state's timeline to begin 2026 FIF preparation. So just because they're not a part of this amendment doesn't mean that they won't be a part of the plan. In fact, they may be pushed to be a part of the greater 2028 plan rather than this immediate amendment.
So just from a process perspective, there were lots of projects that were put in the original evaluation. Many of those didn't, talking about our region, ours did not rank very well. So I guess the question is, does it make sense to try to focus on projects that were already submitted to make those scores better versus starting over? I mean, I'm trying to get a sense of, if I'm the Water Development Board and I'm looking, I don't know how they're going to prioritize for 2026. Are they going to only look at amendments, or are they going to go back in that list and find projects that maybe didn't make the first cut, but may make a second cut? I'm just trying to understand how this is going to work with projects that are already in that list, that in the plan, that weren't funded or weren't ranked well.
So those will remain in the state flood plan. The amendments that we all pass as regions will be in the amended state flood plan. And so
Right.
they'll essentially be added in or changed if there's an existing FME or FMP with a change of conditions or something like that, then that will be changed if it was in the plan originally. But they won't specifically look at these amended or the additions or anything like that. It'll still be the entire state flood plan. And just being in that makes you eligible for fifth. And again, we have not seen the list of even 2024 fifth.
Right.
And so I don't know how to answer your question about prioritization.
But
I
I'm
mean,
with
technically,
Suzanne.
we know the ones that ranked higher, I assume, are better positioned to get money for the 2024, the list that we're current funding, right? I mean, they're going to choose from those top rate, I would assume. I mean, why go through the ranking if it doesn't position you better for funding? So I'm just trying to think, just noodle on this a bit, if it would make better sense for us to think about projects that had already.
I'm
Beef
with
'em up.
you. I'm with you,
Beef 'em
Suzanne.
up.
It's hard to see how a project that wasn't even included last time around, meaning it doesn't have probably an enthusiastic sponsor, it doesn't have a lot of head start on information, is going to jump up and suddenly get funding. I mean, great, it can go in 2028, but if it wasn't a priority a year ago, how is it suddenly going to move up in a funding priority now, when we think there's a lot on that list that really should be brought forward?
I think the only caveat I agree with you, but the only caveat I would say is with certain City of San Antonio projects that weren't submitted the first time.
Totally agree. I mean, we all sat here going again and again and
Yes.
again, Sabrina.
We
Are
don't
you
need to
sure
beat
that's
that
the
drum.
list? Are you sure that's the list?
Yeah.
So there may be some city ones that are new that
but-
could have, but I think otherwise finding the ones that have there been some of our existing that have gotten additional information that could be
I think those would be the exception,
increase the value of
not
the.
the rule.
I think so. I mean, I would hope that we could try to beef up some of our projects that were already submitted to make them qualify.
And that's kind of the question that I have is, and that's where, how can we provide guidance, or how can we help? What are the factors that are going to beef up the project? I mean, is it going to be a multi-use project? Is it going to be a nature-based project, which ideally we would love? But what are some of those factors? And unless you study the criteria, that we can turn to the city or the county or the sponsor and say, hey, if you take this project and beef it up by combining a water use or weight or something, what are those factors to beef it up? I think that's where we as a group could provide some guidance.
When you look at the scoring, I think we have said this previously. There was good intent in the scoring to include the other things that are important, not that aren't your traditional flood control ideas, such as nature-based solutions and the other things that stem from that. But the things that scored the highest and scored the most was number of structures removed, number of lives saved, and all of that. And so to change that number is to sway a project in that number is really hard. One of the things when we said we need to take a deeper look into that is because you do take into consideration the number of people impacted. And one of the things that we saw that, I mean, this is an example. One of the things that we saw that scored very well was water and wastewater treatment plants. And I've had this kind of conversation with Donovan, and it's because if that plant goes under, it, you know, if a water treatment plant goes, you know, is inundated during the 100-year storm, that impacts a lot of people. That impacts all the customers. So that's something we need to take a better look at, right? For us to come in and say, Suzanne, to take a wide look at how can we score these projects better. A lot of them are what they are. You know, you remove a certain number of homes, you remove a certain number, you know, but we're going to have to dig in and make sure that we're really capturing how many people are impacted in the, you know, have to really sell that lives, you know, lives saved and things.
But Ron, I think what you're saying is absolutely the kind of information that the city and the county will have. For example, you know, we can tell the city, hey, wastewater, but we could say the same thing for other utilities like CPS. If we're identifying commercial properties impacted by the floodplain, I bet there's some transformer, some electrical system that's also impacted by the floodplain. Many of those isn't always captured in a strict floodplain because we're just looking at the structure. So that's why I'm saying if that kind of information, I think could help hone in on some of the things we need to be focusing on. And if we do find projects, then we start asking those questions. Is there really an electrical? Is there kind of a wastewater issue there? I think that's where I think we need to be able to provide some kind of guidance to our local sponsors, because absolutely, if you look at our list, man, we're so low on that, and that's surprising.
Or even could a project that was originally proposed be looked at again and maybe, you know, increased in its area of benefit? You know, in other words, instead of it just being a project that was looking at protecting, you know, I don't know, 5 miles or something, I don't know, it could protect larger. I mean, I don't know if the sizing of the project or the engineering of the project could make it have a greater benefit just by the scope of the design of the project. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's anything like that on the city projects or on the county projects that could be looked at to say, we looked at it at this smaller scale, but if we looked at it at a larger scale, it may have more benefit and maybe would rank higher.
I guess one thought I have, which is a concern, you know, the consulting team was hired to facilitate the process, not to do the stakeholders or the local sponsors full work. And I think you're potentially tipping into a point there where you're saying upsize, which may be a great idea, but that is probably a pretty big engineering lift, especially with a fairly short time frame. So somebody like the county, for example, we might be able to turn to them and say, hey, if you think you could upsize it and it makes sense for a variety of reasons, can you pull that off? But I would think I would go back to the sponsor for a major effort like that versus asking the technical team.
Yeah.
Well, it's still having trouble having this conversation if we don't know which projects out of the last fifth call are being selected. That's number one. And number two, most of the sponsors who have projects, it's going to be similar to what Art and I have gone through on other projects. When you're pursuing state and federal funds, there's a certain amount of project readiness that is going to be necessary to move a project from a FME or an FMS into an FMP. And unless you, as an entity, have planning dollars to make these things happen, it'll never get there. So the process is going to be a slow one.
I guess the question, the consultant, I mean, I think, Derek, it is fair. We can't say, hey, consultant, you figure out how to modify projects to improve them. But you guys know the criteria and the projects better than anybody. Can you say these 10 projects we think have potential? Hey, sponsors, if you relook at these, this is where we think you could improve your standing on these projects. I mean, just giving that input back to the sponsors, I think, really helps versus Dave telling Todd, go evaluate everything for Bear County.
Yeah.
I mean, he may do it just for fun with Todd, but I think it's giving some kind of, you're welcome. Some kind of guidance would be helpful.
Yeah, but I don't think that, and I agree with that.
possible.
I don't think that's a big ask as you all go through this. You're more intimately familiar with what was submitted and the criteria and the rankings. So giving feedback to, and we're going to talk about that later in the meeting, but the technical committee, which is really where some of the rubber will meet the road in terms of these more detailed discussions. I don't think that's a big, I know it's work, but I think that's more in line with the feedback that everybody here is expressing.
Yeah, I would caution. I don't think we should do it by the size of the entity or exclude everyone. We need it. We're going to have to do it based on. We're going to have to do it on the potential of the project, and we'll go back and we'll look, and we can maybe put something out to the group that we sent that list out to say, hey, here are some projects that we think that, one overall list that we sent this out to, right? We can back it up with, here are some potential projects that were on the list that we think could score better. If you're interested in how that could work, please reach out to us.
Agree. Did we
Chair,
allow you to finish your presentation, by the way?
oh, sorry.
What's that?
Did we allow you to finish your presentation?
Not quite yet, not quite.
Can we let him finish and then we can beat him up some more?
So I think we had that last line. Yeah. So essentially, it was just the overall. It was kind of the one more, Kendall, to look at the overall schedule. So the standard track was, we were going to start the task 4 and task 5 roughly around the spring of 2025, and that goes into and we're developing the regional flood planning drafts, by February of 2027, and then we get into future funding cycles. That's why we don't know when That's why we don't know when the next amendment will be, because we don't know how the funding will work out. But that's just a standard track. So essentially, this lines up. This is how it lines up. The fast track. We call for sponsors, FMXs. We we get a submitted notice of intent. We are asked for submittal of the full FMX by January 15th. April 1st is when we approve it, and then the amended flood plan in 2026. And that's kind of how the plans go together. So there was some thought put in by the Water Development Board and how these would kind of go in together. Essentially, if you just stay on the standard track, you'll be available for 2028 or future funding opportunities when we don't know when those exactly are set yet by the legislature. But then the fast track, what we're proposing, will fit in that way. It hits the regular plan. So those will not only be included in amended plan, they will still be included in the full plan. So that's kind of how that meshes together, the timelines of that. So if there's any questions on schedules or timelines, I can answer those too. Or if there's any additional questions on the amendment process, but we will take your feedback, work with Kendall, and try to come up with the list. We'll have to do that rather quickly to get that out to the January, to get them out with any time. The one thing that I would caution, I would say we'd probably have to be careful of is, we did put the notice of intent. We don't have to keep that notice of intent, but we did that notice of intent on December 15th, just so we kind of had an idea coming in on January 15th what we were going to be looking at. If we are going to put out more information, we may have to push that back a little bit, or ask the entities if you are going to do this in the December 15th. I guess your notice of intent could still be there, but or we're at least interested.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and January 15th has to hold. That's the one that, in my view, can't slip.
Yeah, because we have to have
review.
2 meetings.
Yeah.
We have to be able to come to you with 2 meetings to present, and those are going to be February, March, and then we approve in April.
And just, nephew, one sec. But just for clarification, if something comes in that's new, and it doesn't meet all the criteria for a full project, the intent is to still put it in as a study.
Well, we would give them the opportunity, and if in January 15th, we'll review that. And we'll go back to the entity or whoever we're working with and
Right.
say, hey, we need this data. And they say, okay, here's the additional data that you need. And they say, and then in February, we'll have that meeting and I'll be able to tell you, here are the projects. Here's some that don't quite meet the criteria. We should be able to help them and get it done. Do y'all want to proceed with all of these? Y'all say yes, we proceed in getting those done. And then in April, we come back and, March, we come back and say, we were able to complete these. These were the ones that were ready. These, we were never able to complete. They're going to be included in the standard track.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that was shaped. That's how we see it happening, Derek. But I think this is the first time we're going through it. Anybody's going through it. I think it's another new process for us. We're just going to have to play it as it comes and just work with the entities and try to do the best we can. The whole goal of the state flood plan after all of this, after we've seen it, is to get projects eligible for funding. And so we want more projects eligible for funding, and we want the projects that we have to be score better, as Suzanne said. So yes, we want more projects on that list. So anything we can do to facilitate that and help that process, we will.
Neffy, I think you had
Thank you,
something.
Chair. Yes, going along with what you're saying, and that's one of the reasons why I was suggesting some kind of go-by or something. Other public works director of smaller communities, man, they have so many things on their mind to do between streets and traffic and everything that they need to do. Yes, they're interested in this, but they may not know how to go about it. Maybe the answer is follow the standard route and submit a study at first. Maybe that may be the answer, which is a fine answer. But I know, from the last numbers I saw, the smaller communities in our river basin, we didn't have very much of them. We had, thanks to Jeff Carroll, we have quite a few, certainly the city of San Antonio, the county, but the River Authority did a great job of bringing a lot of projects, but there are still communities, Leon Valley, there's, other communities, even within Bexar County, that they may not know how to go about it. And I think short of us submitting for them, because we can't, and I agree with the comment that this goes back on the sponsors, but that still we could do something to help facilitate and be able to communicate. And that's kind of my point.
Well, I think that maybe is a more appropriate, approach for the standard tract in the next plan. That's when we have time through the public outreach. Maybe a little bit of trust is built with, some of those communities, you remember, we don't have flooding in our community. So I think, there's a trust level that needs to be built. That's not going to happen between now and January 15th. That's a really good approach for us to talk about through the outreach and engagement in the new plan that we're going forward with.
Well, and we, in theory, also in that standard cycle, there will be money awarded and something we can point to your point about
Right.
building trust. They're like, hey, the state has actually given these dollars to these communities, so the process is working. You need to get in the queue.
Yeah, I think I agree with what we've heard. It's just that the timeline for this First Amendment is so short, it's going to be difficult to make this work. I think what we've learned though through this first process and seeing how projects have scored will kind of guide how you select projects. I know in Bexar County, I've got a lot of flood control needs, but they don't score well because I've got a lot of low water crossings, where it's hard to quantify the safety that's associated with that versus just the pure removal of households from the floodplain. Well, there are X number of projects only that fit those kind of criterias. But if you talk to these communities and talk about some of the things that Ron said, look, these are the type of projects that will score well. Look at your community, see if anything hits these type of criteria, because those garner extra points. You have a lot of low-income communities which are really going to score highly. Like Ron said, if you have a wastewater treatment plant that needs to be flood-proofed or something like that. Anyway, I think a lot of these dollars can be geared toward these smaller rural communities, and I think that was probably the intent of the Water Development Board at the inception.
And I do want to follow up with that and say that we haven't heard anything different from what I had told you last time on the scoring being updated. Whether there was a glitch in there that's going to help some of your low water crossings score much better. We've looked at some of your projects, Dave, and they're going to go. There'll be a handful of them that much more better.
Have we heard anything about a new timeline for when the revised scores will come out?
For the revised score, no. But we are hearing that we're still on that end of December, first part of January to hear on the first round of funding.
Okay.
Chair, one last question. Understanding some of the challenges that the city of San Antonio and other communities have, has there been any discussion, Ron, about structures that are impacted by flooding that may reside outside the BFEs or the regulatory floodplain, or does that not even factor in? Meaning, if we have proof that in 1998 and 2002 these areas flooded, even though it doesn't meet the FEMA criteria of 1.5 square miles to put floodplain in there, can that be submitted, and will it have the same?
Yes. So that was a challenge in the first round, Neffy, where a project would come to us and we had to decide how we were going to report that. Were we going to report it with our floodplain, which is one way to do that, or do we provide that with the floodplain that was provided with the study? So we went with this, which we went with the one that benefited the most. It wasn't always the same one. We'll probably have to kind of figure out a more streamlined approach to how we're going to do that. But yeah, that was a challenge for those projects that weren't necessarily or could have been in the fringe, right? Or could have had different floodplains. Now, some of the localized flooding, it doesn't have to be in a FEMA floodplain, right? You just have to show that there's flooding, right? So it's the localized flooding still is available. If it's in the floodplain, yes, there are some differences between what is necessarily the straight riverine flooding, which is some of the you get into pluvial and fluvial flooding, and it becomes differences, and what do you really relate to? But we were able to do whichever showed the most benefit. So yes, we took that into consideration in a lot of places, you do not have to be in a effective floodplain if you can show that there was flooding in the study.
No, my only other question is what happens between January 15th and April 1st, which I think leads us to the subcommittee next item.
Yeah, those were the processes that we had shown there. But
yeah, it's basically, yes, we're going to a technical committee. So yes, we need to create new committees. So yes, let's go to the next item.
Yeah. So that perfect segue. Thank you.
Reading the agenda.
You're looking over my shoulder. No, so the next item is discussion and appropriate action to establish, it says subcommittees. If those of you who participated, the last time we had 2 committees, we had a communications and a technical. I think I'm open to the discussion, but I don't see a need for at this point, I'll stress, for a communications committee or anything like that. My recommendation to the group is that we focus on a technical subcommittee to get through this next, this April timeframe, and then we can revisit through the rest of, the next year or two. But really, it's sort of hot and heavy in these next 4 months or so, 4 to 5 months. Just some reminders before we start the discussion. We can have a maximum of 6 members from the regional group on the committee. There's no issues about like the number of people on the executive, from the executive committee to be on the technical committee. That's not a problem. The last time we went through this, it was myself, Kara, Dave, Debbie, Jeff Carroll, and Steve Klaus. Obviously, Steve is retired. I'm, as chair now, I'm recusing myself from this next go round. Stop laughing. So that's just some facts about who was on the technical committee last time. But the action coming out of this would be for the group to agree upon a slate of up to 6, don't have to have 6 folks to serve. And then once that group is formed, when they first meet, they'll select their subcommittee chair per our bylaws. So we're not going to select the chair here. It'll be that group when they first gather and come together.
So, Derek, could you sort of talk through how, given the schedule that we just received from the consultants, how would you think the technical committee would slot into that to do the prep work before the first meeting and then before the second? I mean, just trying to get a sense
Yeah.
of frequency of meetings and how,
Sure.
what you think is going to work.
Kendall, can you go back to the Ron's schedule? Go to the other one, please. That one's a little bit better, I think. So knowing that we're getting intense in December, theoretically by mid-December, and we should have everything in hand by no later than January 15th. And we need to have a meeting of the full group, likely by I would say mid-February, no later than the third week of February, for the first mandatory meeting that's required by TWDB.
Is there a time, like they have to be 30 days apart of those meetings, or?
No, not by Texas Administrative Code standard. We space them out with time between mid-February and mid-late March to be able to provide our technical consultants enough time to process the information between each round. So January to February, like taking in all of these proposals, being able to go through them, deem which ones are complete, and then we have to receive notice to move forward in February and give time to process those further before March, where we will have to adopt the amendment. Then that gives them a little bit of time to clean up before April 1, but in March, we have to be done.
So we anticipate basically the first time the full RFPG sees it, it's a really, really rough, here's what we got, and some
Yes.
preliminary, versus letting them get farther into it with the technical committee. And then when it comes to this group, kind of quick 1-2 punch, done. I mean, or will we rather do that where we see it rough and then we see it full, or give y'all upfront more time with the technical committee?
My thought, just in working with Kendall and staff on this proposed sort of layout, was give the technical committee time, give the consultant time for a couple of weeks of digesting. Maybe technical committee meets late end of January, early Feb, and it's going to be rough, but that also allows for this guideline, or this sort of guidance and discussion that we were having on one of the earlier items, to help inform the technical consultant going forward. So we're trying to tee up for mid-February or so. If I were there, I wouldn't mind it being rough. I would rather be in the process early, but if I'm open to that discussion, if you think you would rather give the technical committee subcommittee more time and the consultant more time, and y'all are really busting it in February, maybe you're meeting multiple times in February throughout the process, and then we have a down and dirty one at early March, and then another one of the full group, another one mid-March, full group, and we're done. I think that's an option too.
Personally, I felt like last round we were able to really have good discussions in the technical committee. It's a smaller group, it's a smaller room. We always were in person, so we were able to get into them more. That doesn't mean the whole group doesn't have value and input, but that was a lot more, less policy, more down in the weeds on the projects and the issues. And I'd rather see more opportunity for that back and forth with the consultant before it came to this whole group personally, because I thought those meetings were productive. I mean, you guys are the ones having to do the work. Is that helpful, hurtful? You don't care?
No, my personal opinion when sitting back and looking at it is yeah, there's probably some benefit to having that one in January, early February. Number one, to get all the administrative things out of the way, because if we get a bunch of amendments in, the meeting's going to take a while, right? We're going to have to, because we're only going to have one probably, and so we're going to have to hash through whatever we get in one meeting. So we're going to have to block out a pretty good chunk of time. And I foresee that meeting being a list saying, this checklist back here, okay, we got in we got in these 10, and this is what they checked off the list, and here's what we're still working with the entities to do, and we think we're going to have to do this, and this is what we're going to present to the planning group in February, and that's when you can ask for, hey, we want to see more information, or so yes, in that aspect, Kara, it was very good when we got to meet with the technical committee, because it kind of was our first run through, and we could tell, I mean, if we couldn't answer your questions, or the technical committee had a bunch of questions, we knew we had to kind of revamp what we were putting in front of the whole group. And so it was very beneficial to us, and it gave us an idea of what we needed to what we needed to clear up, what we needed to focus on, and go from there. So
Yeah, in my mind, it feels like you've got to get in front of the technical committee very quickly after that. I mean, 2 weeks, or whatever little minimal time you've got to digest what's there and start working that. The question is, do we bring it back to this group? You meet February 1, the technical, and February 15th, this group, and then go back to work? Or do you do 2 or 3 meetings with the technical committee before we first come to this group? And I mean, that's just kind of really a, hey, what does this group think kind of question.
It's gonna largely depend on how many you get. If you only get 2.
Yeah, I'm not expecting to have a whole
Yeah.
bunch, and I saw the
Yeah.
value in the technical subcommittee on that first round, because there was so much to talk about. Now that the list is already in and we're just talking about amendments, it's a much more focused discussion. That even said, is that having this stuff completed by March for an April submittal is incredibly fast. So I'm happy to be part of that and kind of facilitate a little bit. But there's the discussion from the technical group is going to be limited to just this amendment process. And the sooner we get that rolling, the better, because people are on vacation here in the next month.
I mean, Dave and Kara, Kara, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like, are you more in, but are you more in favor of the subcommittee meeting multiple times in February and then cramming the full board meetings closer together?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, you lived it last
Yes.
time. That's why I'm.
And maybe what we do is we put on our calendars holds for 3 meetings. And once we see after January 15th how many we get, I agree with Suzanne. If there's 35, that's a different conversation than if there's 5.
Yeah.
And, and so maybe once you see how many there are that are actually submitted, we can, adjust. But if we, for this group, put 3 dates, an early, a mid, and then we know our final one can't slide, and we pick between those 2 based on what we see from them.
We technically should hear something December 15th.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're going to give us a notice of intent.
Okay. So
right?
by then we should know.
No, by December 15th, we should kind of be able to
With
say.
maybe a straggler or 2.
So I'm going to think that since that's 2 weeks less than that out, if you don't know already, then hey, you're probably not.
So Chair, we have multiple sponsors here at this table in this audience here. What's the feeling? I mean, could we ask the sponsors, are you planning to submit something? I mean, and that question is being directed to our new member, as well as the River Authority and the county. And Jeff Carroll is on the call, and there's other folks on here. I would ask of them.
There is an intent to submit. I don't know if they are aware of the intent to submit by the 15th. I will make sure that they are aware. So yes, we are submitting.
How many?
I am recommending one for sure that I know of. There is another one that they plan on submitting, and it's going to be for the gates, the floodgates.
We've heard of another one.
We can also
we
can follow up with the planning group and notify how many notices of intent we did receive.
Yes.
But even as it stands, the number wouldn't really impact the establishment of the technical committee today, because we won't set those dates at this time. I'll be working with those committee members to select the dates. So the actual number, especially by the 15th, we'll be able to get a feel on that to schedule technical committee appropriately. But we're not prepared to schedule those committee meetings at this time. I'll work with those members after today.
And I think committee members should probably, for those interested in the technical subcommittee, probably plan on multiple meetings in February regardless.
Don't
I
go
think
to Italy.
that's the gist of it. You know, regardless of how it's going to shake out, but I know people are looking at calendars and that sort of stuff, and I definitely respect that. So, but if you're interested, I anticipate probably at least 2 meetings in February of the subcommittee, maybe even a third.
And those are always best in person. I mean, I think I tried to do one remote and it's just like it's not even worth.
Yeah, it's a challenge. You can do it, and we will make it available hybrid. But it definitely works better in person for those because of the details.
And so I will say to add on top of that, my gut tells me that there's probably at least 5 or so that have been interested. And that may be within the same entity, right? 5 projects. So I've heard about 5 different projects or so that people haven't that may be submitting. So I would say 5 to 10. I think so. I think it's going to be a small number, Neffy.
So a dozen. So we're looking at
Yes,
about a dozen.
let's just say a dozen, and I think that's going to cover you probably.
And as a feeling of magnitude, how many projects are in our regional flood plan right now?
Yeah.
Yasmin, did you want to say something?
I was just gonna say that I know that the city of San Hedwig is also thinking about submitting one for a low water crossing. There was a fatality a couple of years ago, so for sure they've been asking questions and they'll be submitting a letter of intent.
And let me ask.
We identified it in our flood risk review meeting.
And are you sure we don't have it identified in the plan?
I'm not sure.
I would check. I think it's
I'm pretty sure
identified
it's not in the plan.
Oh, it's a county. I think it's one that the county has. Let's make sure, Yasmin. We'll work with you to make sure.
Okay.
Ludovine will probably
will
know which one that is because
we
particularly put that one in the first round because of the fatality.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
let's make sure that one's not in there. But we can definitely we'll let. I don't know if we have St. Hedwig listed as another partner, and that's something that we could do.
And I can give the
partner.
floodplain administrator. Yeah, I can give the floodplain administrator.
Okay.
Yeah, that way we can coordinate.
So
I have
without getting into all the details, but
one more
question.
question. The letter of intent. It is a actual letter of intent.
No, the request is that entities go to the Region 12 website, and there's just a contact us form, and you just say, hey, and then we'll be able to follow up and get the information that we need. But there's no there's no form.
Okay, got it.
Ron, we do that. Okay, so I think obviously we don't know everything, but I think we know enough to say if you're interested in the technical subcommittee, please plan on being available for 2 or 3 meetings in February to support this effort. And with that, I would like to open it up for folks to either nominate somebody or just say I'm interested.
Oh man.
I have Dave.
Chair, as you have recluded yourself and I was in your shoes before, I'd like to jump in.
Okay. Interest from Neffy?
I'm
I'd like
happy
to stay involved.
Is that Jeff?
Yes, I would like to stay involved.
Okay, that's Jeff.
I'm happy to stay or happy to step down, which, as we reach, we need more than 3, but if we're at 7, I'm happy to hop off.
I was going to say Dave and Neffy would be a great tag team. Just take it all on.
There you go. I think Donovan is dying to do it. His face over there is like, oh, hell no. Yeah, Steve looked at us half the time going,
I'd be happy to put my name in the hat, but I would suggest you get some alternates just in case the scheduling doesn't work.
That's
that
fair.
way you have others to go to if there's dates that work for the majority and somebody else can't. So I would like to put my name in, but
I would be glad to be Suzanne's alternate.
Yes. Okay. I'm making notes. So I've got right now Dave, Neffy, and Jeff. Kara is interested if needed. Suzanne is interested with Debbie as an alternate.
I'll volunteer.
Sabrina, thank you. Is there anybody else that is interested? Yeah, anybody on the call? Jeff already chimed in. Yeah. So my suggestion right now.
Hold on, Jose, did you want to chime
sorry.
in? No? Just unmuted?
Sorry, I said I would be interested as well.
Okay, that was Jose Reyes with MyStas.
Jose, right. So Jose is interested. You want to be a backup? Yeah. Yeah. So what I've got is definite interest from Dave, from Neffy, from Jeff, from Suzanne, from Sabrina, and from Jose. That gives us 6. And my suggestion would be that Debbie and Kara are alternates if schedules don't work out. Kendall, are we okay with that?
I'd have to check bylaws in terms of voting members being alternates on the committee, because they'd still be committee members. Typically, it's somebody representing your own entity that serves as your alternate.
So we would not attend unless one of the committee members called, and maybe we're not official, but if Dave called and said, hey, I can't be there this week.
Okay, so with Debbie
Or-
serving as Suzanne's.
I don't know if that does us any good, Kara. If you haven't been to the first 2 meetings and then I ask you to come in the third one, you have no idea what happened. You're either able to sit in the gallery and listen or not.
What I was
So-
proposing, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry for the confusion, is you've got 7 people's names. You do a doodle poll and say, these are the dates that we're looking at for meetings. And then when you get that in and you say, I've got 6 that can meet on these days, lock them in, the other ones can't do it, then they fall off. What I'm saying is, you don't know the dates yet for the meetings. And if you try to schedule around just 6 people and then you end up with nobody that can meet all the meeting dates, then you don't have any alternative. This way you can at least have a bigger pool of people that you're checking on dates with. Because, people are traveling, people have commitments, they just can't meet it. So that way, once you lock in the dates for those that can actually do it, then that's your committee. The rest of them say they can fall off because their schedule won't allow. But it gives you more to play with when you're doing your scheduling.
Okay, what if today we established a technical committee and we selected up to 6 to be on there based off of scheduling? We can still do that if one of those 6 fall off and another member sits on. They, as some not being established on the subcommittee, wouldn't have any technical voting, but they could sit there ex officio, and it wouldn't mess with our quorum requirements, but this committee wouldn't necessarily be voting the first time in February or anything like that. So because we have to take action today to establish a subcommittee, we can pick members and we can always adjust at the February RFPG meeting when we all pull together. But when it comes to scheduling, I can't have more than 6 in the room, whether you are officially as established today or not. So if I can just have whoever's committed on the committee today, that's great, and I can still schedule with the alternates just fine. I'm just technically, that's the way that we have to do that. Sure. So for 6, it looks like I have Dave, Neffy, Jeff, Suzanne, Sabrina, and Jose, and I'll also include Debbie and Kara in our scheduling, and we can work from there.
I wouldn't consider them alternates. Whoever doesn't make it, doesn't make it. I don't think you need to have, I never intended that there would be people sitting in the room that weren't voting.
Yeah.
That was not my intent.
I know. I think the intent is we figure out what's going to work in the next week or 2, and then we will finalize. I think what my suggestion is, we have the slate of 6. We know that Kara and Debbie have both expressed interest as backups. My suggestion is we vote on the 6, and then if the scheduling doesn't work, then we as the administrative entity will work to make sure that Kara and or Debbie, depending on the needs of the group, are able to participate. Is group comfortable with that?
Yeah, so the question is, do the bylaws say that the RFPG has to select the committee, or it does?
Yes, and
Okay.
so the planning group will have to select the committee members. And so we can always change the membership. And so we can work with these 6. If there's a change, we can come back in February and make that change just fine. I just technically need to establish a committee today to be able to hold these meetings for Open Meetings Act.
Yes, I like Suzanne's idea that, yeah, we may need to look at the bylaws. I also have faith that Debbie and I as alternates have big enough mouths to have an opinion and voice it thoroughly,
I
whether we're
can't-
voting members or not.
I'm not even going to weigh in on that statement. We will figure it out. So could I have a nomination and then a second for Dave, Neffy, Jeff, Suzanne, Sabrina, and Jose to be this technical subcommittee?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. You are all now formally blessed in such a manner. Moving on to item number 8, public comments. Kendall, do we have any public comments?
Yes, sir. Please come up and introduce yourself. We have 3 minutes.
All right, Alan Stanton, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm a consultant, local, supporting City of San Antonio on amending an existing FMP for Judson and Lookout Road. It's a low water crossing. I saw the schedule come in from these meeting minutes about the December 15th notice of intent, and I just wanted to make sure that I didn't know if it had to be in a public meeting. There was some ambiguity in that. So I'm here now saying City of San Antonio intends on submitting an amendment for that particular FMP, which would be, it's already on the state flood plan, but it's just to improve the benefit costs. There's going to be some additional natural channel type stuff on the project. So we're working through that. And I also spoke with city staff today, and they said they do anticipate potentially submitting on additional amendments for FMEs from their hazard mitigation action plan, but that hasn't been solidified yet, but potentially be expecting those. And let's see here. Oh, I guess another example of what we're doing for another county in the Nueces Regional Flood Planning Group, just tying to Neffy, your concerns about kind of some of the smaller communities. They've identified some additional areas that need to be restudied or studied as part of the FME process through their master drainage plan that they've been doing the last year and a half or so. So we are submitting some additional FMEs for them. So, so for smaller communities, I'd recommend maybe if the consultants could send an email that clarifies the date of the notice of intent, when that is and what that means. I think that would help on the consultant side supporting the smaller communities and send that to smaller communities. And then also, if all the sponsors and other communities within this region, if there was maybe an email that could be sent on, hey, if you have this information or this type of, this level of data, potentially you can submit an FME for the 2026 funding, and then 2027 funding, they can have the information, or 2028 to actually submit on the construction projects. So that would be my simple recommendation for what can be provided to the smaller communities to actually make things happen for the for the smaller communities. That's all I got. Thanks.
That was the best notice of intent we've had. In person. Thank you. Next item, date and potential agenda items for the next meeting. So in accordance with the accordance with the Water Development Board guidelines, we have to meet twice during this amendment process. And these are some potential dates, knowing that based on the conversation that we had about when the technical subcommittee will meet, we may have to tinker with that a little bit. But we wanted to put these out there and get them as placeholders unless there are major concerns. And please let any comments or questions. Go ahead, Kendall.
Just to be clear, I would like for you to pick a February date.
Well, but see, so I think some of that was maybe because if the technical subcommittee group is meeting multiple times in February, is even in mid-February, is that going to work? That is my concern for picking a February date.
Well, can we pick an early and a late February and see how it goes?
I mean, I think the earliest would be one of those dates that are on the screen, the 11th or the 13th. But I think there probably needs to be one at the end of the month.
Yeah.
Of the end of February.
I know I cannot do the 11th. So for the mid-February, it's 13th, or y'all enjoy a meeting without me.
I would have to say, Kendall, there would be a need for, there's a potential need for a meeting before the February, which before one of these meetings. I don't see a need for maybe more than one before the February meeting. I think the multiple meetings will become between the February meeting and the March meeting. So I think the need for just one technical committee meeting before the 11th or 13th, and that could happen at the end of January.
To make recommendations, because that's the intent of that first meeting, is kind of say what goes forward to some level of further examination or not. So you're saying between January 15th, getting everything in, that you'll have the consultant team and the technical subcommittee. Between those two, y'all will be prepared for February 13th.
Nick, TWDB, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, I just want to say that this is not in any way a requirement, but for my regions that I currently cover, regions 6, 15, and 14, they're also having a meeting every 1 month after their previous meeting. So I would highly recommend that y'all do consider it. However, like I said, that is not a requirement or anything of the sort. So
you mean they're meeting in January?
So the Region 6 met in November. They're going to have another meeting they're having a meeting in December. 14 is having one at the beginning of December. We're going to have another one in next week to finalize that stuff. So yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I thank you. Unless there's feedback from the group, but I don't see the need for a January meeting for the Region 12.
So may I make a proposal then to do a meeting on February the 13th? I'll pick afternoon. Either one is fine with me. I'm just putting something on the table for us to. February the 13th at 2.
Agree.
I'm good with that. Okay. And then I would suggest if we want another tentative date, or do we want to stick with mid-March? And we're good.
We do have to be mindful of spring break. All of the San Antonio districts have the week of March 10th, just from a quick dive there. So we would be looking the week of March 17th. And that would give then the technical consultants 1 week to turn around and clean up before the April 1 deadline. But I assume we've always had trouble scheduling around spring break, so I figured we'd want to avoid the week of March 10th. But if that works, then we can
Not
talk
many in this room have children of spring break age, maybe nephew Jeff. The only thing I'm going to add is the week of the 17th through 21st. The latter half of that week is Texas Water, which, a bunch of the consultants are all having Fun Fest with 6,000 of our closest friends in Houston. So, it starts on Tuesday, but really doesn't get growing until Wednesday. So if we met 17th or 18th, probably okay, but that becomes a challenge for.
Preference for the 17th, we could meet on St. Patty's Day. Afternoon, I would
please.
assume 2 o'clock. All right, there we go. I'll just not talk. All right, we've got dates, we've got feedback for those. Do we have any last comments for the group before we adjourn? There's no, well, this is December. There are no other meetings until February for the full group. All right.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So could I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great holiday.
Thank you.